So the degree to which light that lands on an object will be reflected or scattered so we can see the object, right, is called, it's measured by its albedo. And albedo and percent reflectivity are about the same thing. If something has a percent reflectivity of 50%, meaning 50% of the light that falls on it will be reflected back, then it has an albedo of 0.5. So they're related that way. So for instance, let's look at kind of the albedo or the percent reflectivity certain objects would have. Depending upon the thickness of the cloud, thick clouds could have an albedo or percent reflectivity of 70 to 80%. That's pretty darn high, isn't it? Clouds that are relatively thin might only reflect 25 to 30% of the light that falls on them. And they would have, thick clouds would have an albedo then of 0.7 to 0.8, where thin clouds would be 0.25 to 0.3. Snow. Snow can have a broad range of percent reflectivity, between 50 to 90% reflectivity. One of the things about snow is that, for instance, if you go skiing, you know that you can get a sunburn when you go skiing. And the reason is we talked about how white objects are very reflective in that all of the colors of light that hit them are reflected back and recombined, so we see that object as white. So if you are on snow all day, basically you're receiving a lot of reflected light. So it has a can have a relatively high albedo or percent reflectivity. Grass, notice that its percent reflectivity can be about down to 5%, which would mean what, 95% of the light that hits it is going to be absorbed. Forests, again, a relatively low percent reflectivity, that would mean a high absorbance. Wet plowed field, between 15 to 25% reflectivity. Asphalt, one of the things that you know about asphalt, and would depend upon its color and its texture, then it tends to be very absorb colors in that low reflectivity. Here's a good example. We see two roofs. One is a light colored roof and one is a dark colored roof. And as you might imagine, the dark colored roof has a relatively low percent reflectivity. 10 to 15% reflectivity would mean what, 90 to 85% absorbance. So that's how that goes. If you paint your roof lighter color, you will have a greater percent reflectivity, less absorbance. A sandy beach, it can tend to reflect only 20 to 40% of the light that lands on it. And water, boy, this is quite a range, isn't it? And like this says, it depends upon the angle of the sun to maybe a large body of water like a lake or an ocean. How much of that light hitting it, now that would be visible light, will be reflected. Maybe only 5% to 80% will be reflected.